Okay, hopefully you all had a nice leg stretch there. So we're going to be jumping into the audience Q&A. And we'll open up with a question from the man in the corner. But if you want to ask a question, you can line up by the mic, and we'll get you when you can. So the question from the man was, do you mark a difference between a feminized man versus a masculinized man?
For everybody?
Yep.
Repeat the question.
Do you mark a difference between a feminized man and a masculine man?
Well, I know the difference between a boy and a man, and I've seen a lot of men who have what you might call feminine traits or behaviors, but if they're comfortable who they are, it doesn't really matter. You know, if they've evolved into who they are and own that, it doesn't really matter how it came out. You know.
I'll answer that a little differently, with the caveat that I'm putting my own reading on the term feminized or masculinized man. I think we may look at men who are self-identifying with the ideology of feminism and call that the feminized man, and I think that's the terrorized man.
You mentioned the lack of like initiations or these tribal rituals that used to be apparent, or maybe still are apparent in places like Africa. And I'm interested to hear more about that, and maybe what ways, kind of consciously and unconsciously, these things are happening. These kind of rituals, or men are seeking these things out. Like often initiation often means a wound or being broken down. And so I'm just interested for you guys to talk about what ways that happens, like what ways we, younger men can find that transition into being a man.
I'll take a stab at that one. I think the number one thing that a young man craves, and maybe I'll just speak from my own young man, belonging. To belong to the tribe, to be one amongst equals, and to be accepted, and maybe not the word loved, but to feel that camaraderie, that brotherhood. I think that's innate in the guts of a human male. And I think that a man will do anything to get that. And so we see this in modern culture, inner cities. You see it in the gang that's hanging out on the street corner. And we watch this on every single television show. The kid, in order to get accepted in that tribe amongst those men, what he perceives as men, is he's usually got to commit a crime, right? So that's an initiatory process, and it definitely involves pain if he gets caught, or maybe some pain afterwards if as they beat him up to make him feel like he's tough enough. But that's a dysfunctional initiatory process, and so in our culture over the last 2,000 years, you've seen that the churches have implemented systems that sort of recognize the growing up of a young person. So the Catholics do it one way, the various sects of Christianity do it other ways, the Jews do it another way, and the Muslims as well. So there is initiatory processes and formalized ritual out there that are supposed to sort of take over for what we kind of lost, thousands of years ago. So all I can say is that in the circles where I hang around, the key piece is a man needs to see his own shadow in order to be free. And what I mean by that is that whatever we hide or repress or deny is really in charge of us. It's really running the show. And men who are not seeing their shadow, they're hiding all that, they're dangerous. And I've been guilty of being dangerous at several points in my life as well. And so the initiatory process takes a man in a very firm and supportive way, face to face with his own shadow. Why? So he can own it. Rather than pretending it doesn't exist, he can pull it out from behind and bring it right up front and say, that's me too. And then he's got a chance of actually working with it. And you know, the shadow is an interesting thing. You talked about wounds. Most of our experiences in our lives when we're growing up, and we try to say, how do I fit in? We start cutting off pieces of ourselves so we can fit in. Maybe they'll love me if I don't talk so much. Maybe they'll love me if I don't sing so loud. Maybe they'll love me if I stop scribbling on the walls with my crayons, right? But what we do at the same point is we start cutting off our natural talents, and that creates pain. So when we can take a man right up to the edge of his shadow, he finds his pain, but right underneath that, he finds his gold. And that's what a good initiatory process can do.
So, on initiation, I think initiation ritual is very important, and the only example I have right now is many years ago I did amateur boxing, and in the boxing club, there was this sort of initiation there where new guys would come through, everyone talks a big talk, how they want to fight, and once you put them in the ring, you find out what they're actually made of. They can't hide behind their words anymore. I think a lot of men are untested, and that's why they act tough, because there's kind of like they're putting up a wall, basically. They're trying to show how tough they are, but it's a lot of insecurity. But in the boxing club, you couldn't, once you were in the ring already, you couldn't talk the big talk anymore because we'd actually expose those people. The fact that they didn't have any experience, they got beat up, and most of the guys never came back again. But the guys who did come back gained respect from everybody in the club, right? They were already initiated. We weren't trying to beat them up anymore in the ring. It was more technical sparring. But when they showed up, we wanted to see if what they were made of, they're actually going to stick around, and if they're actually worth what they were saying they were worth, and as tough as they were saying. And most of the time, that turned out not to be true. Most of the guys just disappeared who came through the club. The guys who stuck around, they've been initiated already. They've been proven they were tough. They didn't have to be good, but they were tough because they can take a beating and then stick around, and everyone respected that. And then it's kind of a bit of a camaraderie there. So.
I wonder if the power of initiation can be a more intimate thing, too, than a ritualized process. Because thinking back about what might have been my initiation into manhood, if you will, the things that come to mind are things that my father and my uncles initiated me into, and there was no loss of a tooth or going into a boxing ring or anything like that. It was, this old queen can frame a wall and hang a window, believe it or not, because I helped Dad build an extension to the house when I was 12 years old. And it wasn't just standing there and handing him the tools and that sort of thing. Dad would show me how to do this section, and then he'd say, now you do it. And, I can't do that. Well, of course you can. I just showed you how. And doing things like learning how to build crab traps and going fishing and bringing home the dinner, things that my mother and sister weren't even remotely interested in, and they were busy doing things that I wasn't remotely interested in, but I was bonding with my father and my uncles and my older male cousins, and that was a kind of an initiation. And I think in the pressure to make every experience and opportunity equal among the genders. So if Johnny and Dad are going to go do this, then this little sister has to come along because, she has as much right to learn to frame a wall as Johnny does. Well, she may not be interested, but she's being pressured to do that. And so Johnny's being deprived of that experience with his father, which is, although neither I nor my dad would ever put it in those terms, is a kind of an initiation.
Listening to Corey speaking, pretty much every time you talked, it made me think about the work of a man named Ernest Becker. He used to teach at Simon Fraser, He was an anthropologist, and in his final work, Escape from Evil, he whittled a problem of human beings down to that you need to feel like a person of worth in a world of meaning. And that kept going through my mind every time you talked. And a lot of the mythology that you bring up, and it is mythology, they were designed to meet those conditions, to provide those conditions. But what I've seen, and actually I know John would have a lot to say about this, is that a man's worth is quite often put in the hands of the woman. He calls this publicly conferred identity. And that you can see this with politicians. They're often not successful unless they're married and they have a happy woman on their arm. And a man's worth is quite often assessed on the happiness of his partner. And I think that that's a problem. I think that one of the things I try to promote is men taking an interest in their lives separate from other people and defining themselves separate from this identity. If you want to build on that. I know John could probably talk for an hour on it.
Ernest Becker sounds like a pretty smart guy. Is he still around?
No, unfortunately, way before his time.
I would have loved to have met him. So the commonest thing I've heard out of women's mouths, the women who sort of are attached to the arm of the men that I hang around with, is, "Are you going to that thing again with those guys?" and the man says, "Yeah." And you know why she doesn't really hassle him about it? You know why she finally says, "Yeah, okay, that's a good idea"? Because he comes home whole. He comes home full. He comes home safer. He comes home sweet. And you know what? It turns her on. And he's ready to engage. He's ready to see her, to look at her, direct eye contact, no shame, no looking away, no hiding, no being silent, and even equipped with something to say because he's been reacquainted with who he is. And so I think there's a huge amount of power in maintaining relationships outside of the primary relationship. But we see it all the time, and I've been guilty of it too, is getting so attracted to your partner, your love interest, that you just stop calling your friends, and then all of a sudden she's going out with her girly friends, and as a guy you're at home going, okay, now what, and that's a turning point because you're either looking at more isolation, and then there's unhealthy behaviors that kind of result, and they just create more unhealthy behaviors, or it's reaching out. The coolest thing, and you probably teach this a little bit, guys, is that to call an old friend, pick up the phone and say, "Hey, what's up?" And forget about the fact you haven't talked to him for 5 years, right? I just bumped into an old friend here tonight, and it's like time has not passed because we know each other's heart, and so pick up the phone, men, and call an old friend.
I'm good.
Hey guys, I'm racking my brain on how I can make this brief and not make it look like I'm trying to just phrase a statement as a question, because I really do want to know what you guys have to say about this. It seems to me like, we're getting wrapped up in a lot of sort of linguistic arguments rather than like philosophical. We're talking about masculinity and this is masculine and that. So it's really hard not to get wrapped up in the idea that we're saying that, okay, well, if leadership is a masculine quality and assertiveness and mastery, then these are distinctly, masculine and not feminine. And, if a man does that, he's more of a man and therefore he's better. And if a woman is assertive and has masters something, then she's less feminine or something like that. So I know that that's not necessarily what you're trying to say, but in that context, for me, I've always been a person who believes that pretty obviously in post-industrial society, our traditional gender roles are changing and some of them are atrophying, and that's fine. And that's a couple of years ago, even more so, I believe that was a good thing that we're moving towards, and I still do to a certain extent. I think the problem is in modern society, especially some of the rhetoric that's fueled by just like the social justice crowd, is to pretend that because that would be a good thing, then that's just the way it is. Confusion of what is with what ought to be. So if we want to have equality between the genders, then we have to just pretend that there's no evolutionary psychology basis for differences in men and women. They're just the same. The male brain and the female brain is completely the same. So I think from there we're running into a lot of hypocrisy in the social narrative about what men should be, right? Like, and you run into that in dating, for example. You run into that in, social contract and all that sort of thing in your dealings, intergender dealings. So do you think that there's a safe, acknowledging that we are moving towards less traditional gender roles, do you think that there is a safe way that we can slowly move towards a happy middle ground without all of this hypocrisy and all these, traps that we seem to be finding ourselves in?
Is there a safe way?
Is it possible then? Can it be done?
I think it can be done. I don't know that there is a safe way to do it, because what we're talking about is discarding, in some cases, very deeply held beliefs or things that people prize as possibly a component of their identity or their social group. So I don't think there's a safe way. I think there's going to be a lot of crying and screaming on the way.
The other thing that we always have to keep in mind is that each of us has an agenda, a subconscious agenda. And I'll give you for instance. When I was a kid, my father was, in my judgment, distant, disconnected, not available. And so when I arrived in my 20s, I was desperate for a male model, somebody older than me, to give me what I perceived that I hadn't gotten as a boy. And at the same time, I was pissed off with these fuckers who didn't give a shit, right? Excuse my French. But I was, that was where I was coming from in my 20s, because I was angry with these men. So the reason I'm responding this way is that this social agenda is one thing, but each person who's standing up and speaking about it, I challenge you to own your own crap. Figure out what part of this is your story and what part of it is society's story. Because if we blame everybody else for this or that, it may be that we feel personally wounded, and we're projecting that onto everyone else. And I think we need to own that. And huge healing comes from owning that, and then stepping up and saying, okay, what's messed up in society? How can we fix that?
So there's no such thing like fancy introductory for my question, but I love your dissertations by far for all the panels. I just have a short question about man vulnerability. Should man expose his vulnerability in terms of like his worry or his fears, and to his family, for example, or our boys in our houses? Well, and is there someone who is responsible to create that safety, non-judgmental ambience for our boys to explore their vulnerability or to confess or something like that? Thank you.
That's a great question. So it's sort of a two-part question. Should men or maybe boys expose their vulnerability? And I would have asked, that's a context-sensitive question, right? In which situation? In a home situation or in a work situation? And I know that's it's the question is in all these different situations. So it has to be then, do you trust the people to whom you are potentially exposing your vulnerability? And for very young boys, then you're inside your family, and selectively, yes. It's not a universal yes within the family, though, because I know that a lot of traditional family values are to crush out vulnerability and make he's got to be the go-getter and go get the money, and he can't do that if he's indulging in his feelings. So within some narrow limits inside a family, yes. And for men in a more adult situation, I guess it's incumbent on them to find a peer group or a support network of friends or comrades or their brothers who engage in the same activities they do in sports or whatever it is they're doing, in which they can do that. But I would say right now that our society doesn't really have that in any kind of a formalized or acceptable way.
I think there's this perception of guys who just don't share their feelings at all, and I think that's complete bullshit. There are a lot of guys who suppress their feelings for sure, and because they feel like they can't open up to anybody because they'll be attacked if they do open up. But I know between myself and my friends, guys will talk about their feelings all day long. It depends whether they trust you or not if you're in the inner circle. And in my relationships with women, if I trust a woman, I will tell her everything. I'm very open with my own feelings, very comfortable with that. I know other guys are too, in the right situation with the right person, right? So it's not just all guys are cold and suppressing their emotions. It depends who you're with. Guys aren't going to open up publicly necessarily, but why should we, right? In our personal relationships, a lot of guys will open up. It depends on the relationship.
I would agree with what you said, John, about men finding a safe place to share. There's huge amount of healing in risking to trust and cracking the silence, letting the genie out of the bag, so to speak. I remember when I was a kid, my father, I never saw him cry. His father died. I didn't see a single tear. I remember one time my grandmother brought home a big bag of bagels, and he loved bagels, and he was like dancing up and down with glee, and I'm like, oh my God, I've never seen that emotion before. But my God, it gave me permission to be really excited. So there's a modeling that goes on in families that men model the behavior of expressing sad, mad, glad, afraid, shame, whatever those feelings are. But here's the catch. I think that our emotional partners, whether it's a hetero relationship, man and woman, or another kind of relationship, doesn't really matter. Whoever your intimate partner is, they crave to know who you are. They want to know our hearts. They want to see inside. They want to know deeper than just our words. So for us as men, we need to risk to open that up and let them see inside. So that's the vulnerability, Advocacy, you're talking about. But at the same time, I do not believe it's appropriate for men to dump all that grief and pain and sadness that they carry around with us. I've got it too, on your partner. Absolutely not. Please don't do that. You know what? A, it's not their crap, and B, they may or may not have the skills to deal with it and separate out that it's yours and not theirs. And so don't do it. Don't do it. Find a safe container with men you trust and deal with it there, and come home whole and love them.
So we'll be taking only 3 more questions. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, Gavin.
So, hello, and thank you for this event, and thank you for all members. The information was awesome. Thank you. And I have a question. I have a different background, not Canadian. I'm from Ukraine. And how do you see the difference or the link between gender equality and decorum? Because what I saw in my country when I'm, taking the bus, the men or boys always give a seat to a woman or to a girl. And what I see here is that everyone just staring at the window like it's okay. Sorry, but yeah, and it's a little bit, not scary, but creepy for me. So what do you think about that?
Well, a wise man once told me, he said, Corey, chivalry is dead. and you know what? I didn't buy it. I still open the door for women. And because my dad did that and my grandpa did that, and it just seems like a nice thing to do. And if there's a couple of guys there, I'll let them in too. I don't know. It's about being helpful. But it's funny. My partner and I were on the Canada line on the way down here today, and we sat in the seats closest to the door. And bless her heart, she points out, well, these are for the seniors and the elderly people. And I went, so. So yeah, you're right. There's an issue of how do we conduct ourselves. To me, it's about respect. Respecting every single person who's within the vicinity of us. What do I have to do to be in respect of them, and what do I demand back from them for them to respect me, so that we can have an equal relationship. So if on that train, a woman walks in with her walker, I'd stand up and say, hey, please sit here, but if she looks like she just finished the sun run, I might not do that, because she's, probably in better shape than I am, right? So it's case by case.
I actually want you to answer. I'm sorry, Eddie. I want you to answer because you're kind of a coach, right? Relationship. So I want you to answer.
Okay. It's different in the Ukraine, obviously, but I think here there's this false equality where we're supposed to be equal in everything except for when women want something more. Women and men both have good jobs nowadays, but men are still expected to pay, but we're still equal, right? Which is complete bullshit. If we were actually equal all across the board, men wouldn't be paying for anything, wouldn't be opening the doors, or any of these other things. Like, I'm fine opening the doors for women, open door for dates and stuff, or as Corey said, if a couple guys hop in, that's cool too. But I know, I'm not sure where the direct, like here, again, it's a false sense of equality. It's this false equality where, men have to give up a lot of stuff, but women don't have to give up anything, right? That's what I think, and I don't know about the Ukraine at all.
Thank you.
I'm very mindful of protocol in public transit. Get up and give me that damn seat, kid. Sometimes I still feel my grandmother's elbow in my ribs if somebody older than me gets on the bus if I didn't jump up right away. But, and I think it's more, rather than related to the demands for equality, I think it's more reflective of a deterioration in our public civility overall. And even 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago on a bus, if some kid was not jumping up to offer an elderly person or a pregnant woman or a man or a woman struggling with infants in arms, and those are the people who really deserve that kind of civility, you could make eye contact with them and, today you walk on the bus and everybody's, you can't make eye contact with everyone. We're increasingly unaware of the presence of other people, and I think that's more the issue in that context than equality, really.
Thank you.
Let's throw one more thing in there. You talked around something that that I want to comment on. It's machismo. Macho, and it's Eddie kind of got around a little bit. Is there's a quality of masculinity, or I don't even think it's masculinity. It's an act that some men put on that is designed to make them look. Well, you're talking about the guys in the ring, right? They're bragging about how good they fight, but when you get them in the ring, they can't fight at all. It's creating the illusion of being something that they're not. And I think in various cultures, maybe the Ukraine, I don't know. I think a lot of men get raised believing that they're only as good as their act. And what we're finding out is that true health and balance and being able to be productive and in intimate relationships comes from how much you can be authentic. Entirely opposite approach.
Hello. My interest is in men's physiological health. And as a previous speaker was alluding to societal differences, I usually choose to define society as evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar has. Like in hunter-gatherer societies, 150 people, That was like your tribe. That's your society. So when we say like Canadian society or any country's society, that's just like summing up everything. So I live in Metro Vancouver. I was born and raised here. And I know like 2-3 hour drive from here, it's a different world. You know, I don't aspire to ever own a big truck or fire a gun, kill any animal. But there are huge societal differences, and especially with regards to health. And the issue was approached about men's suicide rates. And even within societies, like in East Asian societies, Japan, South Korea, suicide rates are through the roof for men and women. In fact, South Korean women kill themselves at a higher rate than men anywhere else in the world. Of course, South Korean men outnumber the women still. But suicide also is like, depends on the country society and the city society. And the odd thing is, you would think, like the poor people have nothing to live for, no food, they would be killing themselves at higher rates than people in wealthy countries, but that's not the case. Like, industrialized countries have suicide rates which are much higher than undeveloped countries. So, like with regards to other types of health, let's say, like, sometimes in society when we talk about the brain and people's mental health, we have like a math, physics type top-down thinking. Everything must be logical. Something bad happened in his life to cause that depression. We don't think like, let's say he's eating a lot of junk food, right? A lot of serotonin is produced in the gut, right? Serotonin makes you feel good. So like serotonin, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, like antidepressants, right? So junk food can cause depression, which might lead to feeling bad. So they did a statistical analysis in Europe about why men die sooner than women, and the primary causes were that men drink alcohol and smoke cigarettes at higher rates than women. So, like, for men to maximize their mental health, I think they also have to improve their physiological health in respects. So in the United States, to cope with the depression recently, the economic issues, they've legalized marijuana, so more drugs for men to consume. So are there ways that you can improve men's physiological health to also improve their mental health?
Yeah, that's easy. Just work and don't eat, or work out and don't eat junk food. It's super simple. There's tons of fitness channels out there, and everyone has a secret to like the six-pack shortcuts and all this bullshit. But you have to work out and you have to eat good food, which is made from scratch, and not consume bullshit and drink pop and all this kind of stuff. So it's really easy to get, don't smoke cigarettes. That's another easy one. Don't drink alcohol or a lot of alcohol. It's very easy to take care of our physical health. But then we also, you want to make sure you take care of your mental health, do some meditation or something that lowers stress and cortisol levels, right? So the
biggest challenge society has, I think, isn't about men's issues or women's issues. I think it's that the corporations are foisting upon us poison in a lot of ways because it's profitable. And so I can only speak for what men should do. I say men should be reading the ingredients on whatever they're bringing into their house. They should be getting rid of all the toxic chemicals that are in their house. They should be, as Eddie says, they should be deciding, what do I got to do right now so that I am even healthier in 20 years, not less healthy. Men, you want to get a prostate exam. You do. Why? Because it takes years for the symptoms to develop. You need a PSA test to make sure you don't have the antigens in your system for prostate cancer. You got to do it. It's not a bad thing. It's not embarrassing. Just go do it. Your doctor's waiting for you to ask them. So things like that, right? What age do you need a PSA? I don't know. Just ask your family doctor. He knows when.
First of all, I would like to say thank you. Actually, I didn't know that it exists until yesterday. There are so many women's support group, but I didn't know that there is going to be a men's support group like this. And so thank you for make it happen. Yeah. So I actually have a question about the relationship because for me, meaning of the life is creating the deeper connection with people or also a romantic relationship. And the thing is, often I see from my female friends or my client, they express themselves, men want to date women and they want a relationship, but what they do is they put hands and they ask to come. So they're creating so relationship is about distance and closeness. But it seems like to me that nowadays men want a relationship, but they want to keep the distance, and they also at the same time they want to be close. So before we ask the question today, question is, what does it mean to be a man today? But what does it man really want today? How do you answer that question?
We have a dating expert here. I'm going to hand the mic over right away.
It sounds like what you're talking about is a sexual relationship.
Not the sexual. It's not
Because
necessarily a sexual relationship because they want to really have a relationship, but they have certain. They don't want to go deeper. They don't want to open fully their heart. It's just like a. It's like a.
That's tough. It just still sounds like a sexual relationship to me. Because if I was in a sexual relationship, the closeness is cool, and you're hanging out with them, you don't want to get too close because you don't want them to think that there's a thing, right? So, you're maintaining distance, but at the same time, when you're together, you're still having a great experience. You still want it to turn into something more. But maybe in your case, what you're saying, they actually want a long-term relationship where they go out and do stuff. I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't know why.
Yeah, for example, John, you said marriage, right? But you have a long-term relationship to creating the happiness, joy together, but you don't want to get married. You don't want to suggest to other men to get married.
My answer may not be very well received because I'm an anti-dating coach in a manner of speaking. I sort of represent a version of the men's movement that is very, very, very small, but nobody actually knows how big it is because it's highly individualistic. What you might be observing is that there is right now, socially and legally, in Western culture, particularly in Canada, very little protection for men against spuriously thrown, sometimes not even seriously made accusations of sexual misconduct. And we have a culture in which it seems to be increasingly acceptable to kind of flippantly make an accusation against a man that he did something sexually, off color or out of bounds, as a way of saying, well, this, dissolve the relationship because he transgressed somehow. And I see that from the female point of view, this is just sort of a casual thing. It doesn't seem very serious. It's like, now he's gone and I can go off on my happy little way. But from the man's point of view, this can have far-reaching and devastating consequences to his life, his career, his future employment, his social standing, his ability to contact his children, and so on. And I don't know, I can't see into the hearts of all these guys you may be talking about, but there may be a growing sort of trepidation of, I can't really let her get too close because it's so dangerous, while they still also want to have some sort of romantic accommodation. That's totally... Sorry.
So can I take a different tact on that?
What's the question is, what does man want?
What does man want? So man wants relationship, man wants intimacy, man wants to be loved and cared for, and he also wants to reciprocate and give that back. So you're talking about a dance. Some people call it the dance of intimacy, right? Now the world is a little strange now. Are you talking about people you met online or people you met face to face?
Oh no, I'm therapist, so I have a client.
Okay, well pick one. Let me pick for you. So in our society, more and more people are meeting people online. Now I remember my first crush was in grade 4 with a girl by the name of Karen, and she smelled amazing, and she winked at me, and in grade 4 I was hooked, right? But I didn't know anything about Facebook or Mingle or what's this other one? You swipe it, you know, Tinder, right? So there's a dance going on, and it's really about getting closer and getting further apart. And I say, if it ain't working, get rid of it real fast and interview some more men. You know, coffee dates only. Don't go for dinner. Don't go for lunch. Coffee dates. You can get them over real fast. You can make a quick decision. It's interviewing. It's human resources. That's what it is.
Okay.
Okay, let's just give a round of applause for our wonderful panelists. Thank you guys so much for coming. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to have done this without people caring to come. Thank you so much to my colleagues for working so hard. And then my little announcement that I had to make. Well, first, before I get to that, when I was one of the founders of this club. I didn't found it by myself, but I was one of the first. And when I envisioned this club, it was in a time where I noticed that there was a discourse on campus about men and a lot of talk about reimagining masculinity and reconstructing it or whatever, and men were not being invited to the party. And let me tell you, that new masculinity was definitely not for their own benefit. So this is exactly what I envisioned for this club, is men talking about their lives, their experiences, and stuff that I'd never be able to tell you guys or as president. And that's why I'm so excited to relinquish my role as president and give it to Jesse. I had a good time, but it's over now. So I'll be vice president, though. Yeah, donations, give us all your shekels, please. And then I just, as a thank you, I want to give the panelists their gifts, and you can give them another round of applause. Do so.